Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, depending on the place where you are connecting from. Welcome to the SafeDev Talk about software composition analysis and static analysis tools that we think that is better that they are together. I'm trying to have you all up with us for this new edition of our webinar series, where we explore real-world strategies to build security into modern software development without slowing the developer workflow. Today's applications are more complex than ever because we have a mix of proprietary code, third-party components, and other elements. And this hybrid approach has reshaped the threat landscape. Okay, we are exposing new risks than traditional. We have a new vector attack with the third parties, and we have traditional companies silos regarding security tools that makes more difficult to have a holistic view and to have a global understanding of our security in our applications. Okay, development teams face overwhelming scan results where they have more pressure to prioritize the faster and remediate smarter, delivering still the functionalities that business is requiring. That's why today's session focus on not choosing between SCA or SAST, but how understanding how these tools complement each other to deliver a full stack and complementary approach, context-aware view of application risk. So our goals for today, just to explore with you why combining these tools are essential in the today hybrid application environments, how reachability and exploitability support teams to prioritize what is really important and what really is impacting the security of the application, identify some practical strategies and some tips for your day-to-day, integrating both tools and applying the tools to your operations. And at the end, of course, something about the future and how we see the evolution of this security and smart scanning capabilities, okay? So today we count with Nathan Beard. Thank you, Nathan, for being here and welcome.
Thank you, Jesus, and it's very good to be here. Appreciate it.
Great. Nathan is a very experienced application security architect that has bridged the gap between development and security. He has a lot of experience integrating or making teams adopting the tools like SCA, SAST, DAST, and other tools across different enterprises environments. He is the creator of OA Seal, that is a tool to transform open API specifications into WAF rules. Okay, so he is quite experienced and he demonstrated that he brings innovation and pragmatism to the API and application security. So I think that Nathan is going to be very insightful people and contributions today. Okay. From myself, you know me, I'm Jesús Cuadrado, responsible of product here in Sayeni, and just to support you with this kind of solutions. So just to start, first, why combining SCA and SAST is so relevant today? At the end, I mentioned before, 80% of the applications in enterprises comes from third-party components. So we have this mix of proprietary code and third-party components that are now or today the main via of attacks to introduce malware or vulnerabilities in our application. This dual risk profile has made that depending on the organization, some developers take care of the vulnerabilities in the code, integrator take responsibility or take care of the components, but at the end, we need visibility in both worlds in order to build and to put everything together and prioritize everything together. I don't know, Nathan, for example, how do you think that this combination has become essential in the current landscape, and probably the main limitations for the teams to achieve this integration?
Yeah, I mean, to start off with, I'm not sure. So I've heard that 80% for quite a while. I think that might even be a little bit old at this point. It's
Mhm.
it, it, over time it's actually continued to increase, right? So we have a lot of our software is developed by open source, brought in from open source, uh, whether it's the software we deploy or the containers that we're bringing in the images and the operating systems. Open source is everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so it is incredibly important that us as software developers and security people have the responsibility to make sure that not just our own code is secure, but also those libraries that just because we didn't write it doesn't mean we're not responsible for it, right? And so
Mhm.
that's where, like you said, SAST and SCA are incredibly important, and they need to be used together because to get the holistic landscape of what everything you have across your organization, you have to include both.
Mhm. Yeah, completely agree. I think that the you have mentioned that we have to, or we need entire responsibility across the end-to-end of the application, depending on or independently of the provider of the part of the code. Could be an open source, outsource the company, whatever. But at the end, and even the standards make this. Remark that okay, you are responsible of the security of the application. You need everything in Inventor, you need everything with all the vulnerabilities for all the things. So yeah, and I
Right.
think that as you mentioned, okay, in this part we are going to have also vulnerabilities or even malware or I don't know a lot of different things. So it's better to be prepared. Mhm.
Yeah, and the other one that uh, you could add in there is a lot of supply chain security issues that have been getting more and more
Yeah.
prevalent and very very risky. So
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And if we were having this conversation, if I can just throw out there, if we were having this conversation even a few months ago, I think that maybe some of the things that I would talk about a little bit is a little bit different. But the world we're living in is also increasingly AI driven, right? And
Mm.
we have this new everything from vibe coding to to all the other things, and that AI is helping developers be more productive. My own development, I use it, of course, and have used it to successfully increase my volume. Right? There's a
Mm.
lot of things we could talk about AI, but here's one thing that worries me that I don't know that other people have talked about so much. Just being more productive as an open source developer is a bit of a scary thing because what happens when all of those new libraries, all that new functionality ends up becoming graveyards for unmaintained projects, or just the volume of them is going to in the future potentially cause problems, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Um, Yeah, I agree that this is changing the way that we develop the applications and we integrate and even it's changing the workflow of development probably. So yeah, we have to adapt to these new capabilities and to improve that part.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And probably regarding the second question I was presenting is the the main challenges or the limitations, I don't know, for the developers. Probably,
Hmm.
I don't know if it's a matter of knowledge, a matter of time, a mix of different things, or complexity to find
Hmm.
vulnerabilities in the third party because it's easier in my own code or mhm.
Right. No, I think of myself as kind of either a developer with a security problem or a security person with a developer problem. Like my background is primarily in the development team, development side, and most of my career was spent in development, right? And I can tell you that not the double negative, but I never did not care, or I always cared about security. Uh, the the challenge is where the development teams are focused, right? At
Yeah,
the end of the year, your what you're judged on, what your objectives and what your ultimately your what you make for your bonus often is based off of what functionality you've put in. what have you provided for the business, right? And so
Mm.
as I don't think it's a matter ever. Or almost ever of developers not caring. I think that's unfortunately a myth that kind of permeates in some cases some security circles. Instead, I think that the real challenge is making it easy, making it fast, and giving visibility to the product and to the management and to the stakeholders, so that everybody knows where those security challenges lie and what time is needed to fix them. Because until then, developers who do fix things are actually putting themselves in a way at a disadvantage in some cases, and that's a big shame.
Yeah. It's true. You have mentioned the focus, and I agree that, okay, where do you put the focus? And in fact, is SCA or the software composition analysis focus on the third parties,
Hmm.
and SAST focus on the code. So
Hmm.
the thing is that probably they don't prioritize, or they prioritize in different queues or backlogs. I don't know how
Right.
to say. Okay,
Uh,
first
mhm.
my code, then the other. But at the end, this is important because at the end, even the strategy is 50% of the vulnerabilities comes from the third parties. It's
Right.
more or less the average. So at the end is if I prioritize each list without the context of the full application, probably I think that we are going to have some issues regarding efficiency, speed, or probably searching the root cause of the problem and this kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
mm,
Absolutely. Well, and I could say so. Kind of what you're getting to is a little bit of ASPM, right? Is that
yeah.
how do you take these things and combine them in a reasonable to get a good risk view of
Hmm.
your risk across, right? And
Yeah.
absolutely, those kinds of tools. I do think that we haven't been talking as much recently about ASPM, and I can only say that that's probably because AI has gotten so hot. But but
Yeah.
but it is an important topic. I do think that whether you're using an ASPM software, I know you maybe have some feelings about that, or whether you or yourself are coming up
Yeah.
with ways to get a consistent view of the threat landscape. Whatever it is, having that prioritized view and not overwhelming developers with just everything is really, really important. I kind of like to kind of take a little sidestep, I really like one of the things that I view as both SAST and SCA, mostly
Hmm.
SAST, but both, is you can never have absolute security. You can never
Yeah.
find
That's correct.
everything. No tool. Anybody who's switched from one tool to another sees very different responses from from one to the next. Well,
Hmm.
in that case, that's you're really not going to get everything, never can get everything, because no such thing as absolute security. So in this case, what I think you're really doing with both the SAST and SCA tools, I think what you're really doing is teaching the developers, is helping the developers to get good practices and good methodologies, and kind of deciding whether it's top 10 like SQL injection, or maybe something new, or the supply chain things with SEA, whatever it is, finding out what those things are, and finding out what those things are and making them visible
Yeah.
helps teach the developers what to look for while they're doing their own coding, as they're going through things, right? And to bring back to what you were saying, things like ASPM software or some ability to make a cohesive view on that really helps to not overwhelm, because you can if you give them everything all at once, there's no learning happening, right?
Yeah. Is right. And you mentioned something very interesting. Is okay. We are teaching the developer best practices and how to do it. And in fact, when we analyze a lot of projects, as you mentioned, a lot of the issues are always the same type. You
Hmm.
have a SQL
Hmm.
injection in every place where you put this.
Hmm.
You have all this structure of programming in all the files. It's because they have a way to program. And at the end, it's okay. You have to change and start doing the things in this other way. So it's okay, you have 20. So probably solve all of them together, change the way you program. So the next time you are going to avoid this type of attack. So you are learning, you are understanding, and you are improving the programming. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I used to, when I was on the development side, the other thing that you would see is as you move from one development group to another, you don't, I mean, it's not copy and paste, hopefully, but but it is bringing those same, you're taking those same patterns from one team to another. And your new people in the team are learning from the existing code that's there, right? So to your point, you often see a lot of the same issue because there is this learning that's happening as an organization. And if you can and if you can adjust that learning by using these tools, then you
Yeah.
can hopefully start shifting the overall view of the applications and the future development as well.
Yeah, and even the other, the second step in this is, okay, if you use the code that you have created with vulnerabilities to train the model of AI or your copilot or your everything, okay, at the end, what you can expect is, okay, that we are going to have this pattern of programming with the same issues, SQL injection or whatever. So at the end, yeah,
Hmm.
it's really
That's how it
interesting.
doesn't
So.
matter if it's a
No,
human
it's
or an
like
AI,
okay,
right? Yeah.
I
Hmm.
teach the developer use secure generators, so it's closing the cycle. Yeah, it's really
Absolutely.
interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Really.
absolutely. I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really doesn't matter. And that said, we need to train the AIs on good code. We need to
Yeah,
train the
yeah.
people on good code, and uh, allow both those AIs to the AI and people to focus time on the
Mm-hmm.
things that are important, so that because you can get there's getting to be a new class of products of AI tools to help remediation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Specifically to help remediation. That's fantastic. It's kind of like the software developers that are focused on security, and can really help to move those things forward. Either way, getting that and using that background to try to improve the future, I think that's going to be incredibly important, especially as, like I had said it kind of at the beginning of this, as the volume increases.
Yeah. The villain is this is the other challenge that we mentioned also before is, okay, I'm going to have if we with one tool I have 100, with two I'm going to have 200 or 300, so it's impossible. But at the end, I think that this common approach supports how we can reduce the noise and how we can remove false positive or things that are not affecting actually my application because of different reasons. So this global or holistic view, I think, is good to simplify and to reduce, for example, the
Mhm.
reachability and contextual information about exploitability. I don't know, how do you see also managing this additional information, for example, for the 3H, in order to prioritize and to say, okay, this is something that has to be solved. This is not required. Your experience with this? Do you think that
Uh,
the teams or the companies use this information, or is
yeah.
something?
Uh, Unfortunately, the existing some of the older tools, the existing tools, uh, you can get into trouble there, right?
Yeah,
Finding out what you need to remediate is a tough problem. I think that one of the keys, and I don't know if anybody, maybe you have some thoughts on this probably, but I don't know if anybody has completely cracked the code yet on reachability.
yeah,
But it's certainly something that's going to become even more important, and you know and maybe I'm sure you probably know more about this than I do, but there's kind of two sides to it, right? For finding the reachability for something, we both need to understand and know the source base of the SAST
yeah.
tool, the SCA, the
Hmm.
library, whatever it is that we're exploring. But we also need to know the details of the vulnerabilities, and I think we're starting to see more and more function data being available, so that you can get to the function level reachability. But even if you don't have that, just getting to the level of visibility of knowing whether something is used or not, those things can help prioritize quite a bit, right? And I think that back to what I was getting at with learning, if you give the opposite can be true too. If you give developers things that are not real security issues, then they're
Mm,
going to tune out. They're going to think
yeah,
that it's just a an exercise that you have to do. I remember a while back, quite a while back, that I was working on a project to remediate. This was not on SAST or SCA. This was on infrastructure, but some Java versions that were out of date, right?
yeah.
And you know, you go. That's a normal thing and a good thing that you need to do. But when I looked, and we're talking about over hundreds of systems, uh, the Java package was not used at all. Zero usage. It was just used by a third party library that installed it. It was off in a corner, dusty, gathering cobwebs. Um,
Yeah.
and so the problem there is spending a lot of time remediating that was not only taking time from other remediations, it was also kind of increasing frustration, right?
Hmm.
And when you're increasing frustration, that's the opposite of what you want to do. You want to build those security champions programs. You want to get developers excited about security, and get them involved, and makes all of our jobs a lot easier, right?
Yeah, I agree because you mentioned the trust in the tool and not providing false positive or things that, okay, is going to have a lot of effort and is not going to contribute anything to the security. At the end, developers is okay, another of this and is to create a new barrier. Because of this, I think that this reachability is important in both sides, in the SAST and in the SCA. In the SAST,
Hmm.
it's not a matter of searching a regular expression because at the end you have to follow the flow of the application because probably okay you
Hmm.
have here a potential vulnerability but you have some previous function that is filtering and is preparing everything so at the end it's not an actual vulnerability. Okay, so
Hmm.
you need to do the flow, you need to analyze the propagation across different files, whatever. So it's difficult to do. As you mentioned at the beginning, it's very tough because it's something complex, it's computational, have a lot of computational effort. But
If it
at the
was,
end,
yeah, if it was easy, we wouldn't need developers at all, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
And at the end, is something that is even in SAST is difficult to do manually. In SCA, it's impossible
mhm,
directly because at the end, okay, is you have this component with this small area where is the vulnerability. Okay, analyze all your methods calling this component and analyze all the flows to check if everything goes or some of them goes through that part. So it's impossible to do manually because you don't have access to the source code. You cannot analyze manually all the parts. So at the end, I think it's something really difficult, but tools providing this are differential, and I think that are saving a lot of time
mhm,
to developers and to the teams. In fact, our statistics are that we teams could save more than 50%, even 60, even 70. And if we combine with exploitability, okay, that is okay, is putting more information and context about the, okay, are you using, for example, a specific version of Java or a specific version of the Tomcat server or if exposed to internet is whatever, you can even refine if something is going to be exploitable by someone or not. And in the SCA, it's easier in this case because we have some scores like the EPSS that support the teams to say, okay,
mhm.
this is more relevant because there is a campaign for attackers. So solve it because the other, okay, it's so difficult that the attackers are not going to try to go there. But yeah, I think that this is the fundamentals, okay, that the developer when receives something, is sure that is something that is going to be a risk actual and just provide the okay, it's a risk because of this, explain everything,
Mhm.
explain what to change and provide the guidance. So the next time he start having this mindset and this knowledge to avoid repeat the same view. So I think
Yeah.
this is important.
Oh, it's absolutely. And it's not the good news is because you said it's very difficult or impossible.
Yeah.
The good news is it's not all or nothing, right?
Mm,
Even if you make small improvements on improving the quality of the results that are going to developers, you're getting that goodwill. You're getting making the changes in trust in what that the findings are
mm,
realistic. And then even if you do miss some, and you have to, you kind of I in my opinion you have to
mhm,
fail on the side of safety, which means the problem on reachability is that falsely saying something is not reachable is could be worse than
mm,
than not including it, right? So you have to be safe, which means you can't always get there. To your point about it's not impossible, but
mhm.
that said, you can start to chip away at them. You can start to make it, you said a 50-60%, totally believable.
Yeah.
um and I think that just that makes it the difference to where developers are going to look at it, think about it, and hopefully not just fix it, but also include it into their future development.
Yeah, it's true. And this is very important. What you mean, or what you say is, okay, if you are not sure that something is not reachable, okay, analyze it. Okay,
Mhm.
only discard something that you are completely secure that is not reachable, let's say. And yes, and if you don't, you have things to solve, but the urgency, let's say, you have the relevance, the importance, and the urgency. So, okay,
Mhm.
do the four quadrants. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, a similar one that I think is a little maybe controversial is a lot of people tend to use whether or not an issue has been exploited as one of their criterias, or whether there is an exploit available
Yeah.
as one of their criterias. I'm actually not the biggest fan of that, and the reason why is because the danger of being wrong on it is that you're trusting that the tools uh,
Mhm.
know whether there's something out there in the first place. But also, again, I think it's as much about training as anything. Uh, It almost doesn't matter whether there's an exploiter available. It's more about how difficult it would be for somebody to attack it, what the risk of it is, and how we can change processes to avoid those kind of issues in the future. So nowhere in that does whether there's an existing exploit really play into that, in my view. I know that's a controversial topic.
Well, to be honest, I don't know if I not. I think there is some parallelisms. You have some exploit and some capabilities to facilitate the exploiting something. Probably the probability of being used by an attacker is going to increase, but I don't know. I think that okay, you have the exploit, but you have to see the rest of the context because probably okay, the exploit needs uh, access to for internet or needs some specific version or something. So at the end, okay, is a parameter, an additional parameter to the evaluation, but it's not just because of there is an
Mhm.
exploit. It's going to be urgent because it's like the rest of things. Yeah, I agree with you that should not be mandatory or the main decision point. Mhm.
And again,
It's not so
I'm sure
controversial,
there's
at least
people.
between you and me. Oh.
And after this, I would love to hear from people who think differently because you're. I mean, it's not a all or nothing kind of thing here, right?
Yeah.
But that said, I do think that sometimes what I'm getting at is I think sometimes it's factor in more than what it needs to be, because I do think that what we really want to do is we want to focus on finding the patterns, the underlying things that are causing the issues, and avoiding those to hopefully avoid the issues in the first place. Let's jump to, if I can, let's jump to SCA for a minute for that, right?
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
we can if we can start looking at what patterns is going to cause problems in an open source library, then that's going to be almost more useful than knowing whether it has an existing exploit. I think of it kind of like instead of KYC, know your customer, I think it KYL, know your library, right? Um, Knowing like who's maintaining it, when's the last check-in, what's the
The
how many stars
reputation
does
of
it
the
have,
maintenance, publisher.
yeah,
Mhm.
how long it's been since issues have been opened or resolved and that sort of thing. All of those things, it gets into a practice of understanding what you have more than the individual necessarily the individual issue,
Yeah,
because individual issues sometimes can be argued about whether they're really vulnerable or not and everything else, but getting to that, and whether it's, and that's just one, SEA is just one example. Back to that, to SAST and our own coding, the same thing happens. Learning where the patterns are, learning where the things are, what you can trust and what you can't trust is the most important thing, I think.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, really, really. I think that, yeah, I think what we had mentioned that at the end, this trust, the amount of vulnerability, all these things are affecting to the workflow of the developers, and it's very important because at the end, I think I had some statistics. More than 40% of the issues are never addressed directly. More than 60% of the reported issues are unreviewed in the sense that, okay, nobody review or analyze or whatever. And I think that everything is because of the workflow that is, it needs to be very straightforward and focus
Mm-hmm.
on business and this kind of thing. So such amount of vulnerabilities is impossible to manage. And I think everything, if we can reduce the maximum, remove all the false positive, as you mentioned before, okay, everything I report is something that has to be remediated and these kind of things. I think that makes that teams embrace this type of tools easier, because in other cases, even okay, it's more work, is an additional barrier, is against the solution. Mhm.
Right. And I've talked a lot about frustration,
Yeah.
and to your point, exactly what you were just
Mm.
saying, reducing that by reducing the number, just the raw number of things that people have to deal with is good. But the other side of that too is also you know being able to prioritize these things against your existing work, right? Because
Yeah.
security is one pillar, right? The development has to deal with development has to deal with the performance. They have to deal with, which can also be a security concern, with performance, availability. They have to deal with functionality. They have to deal with cost. They have to deal with a lot of different areas, to where you have, just like you have security specialists, you have developer specialists, right? And um, when you're going into a backlog and you're looking at a backlog of items to work on, those ultimately all have to get prioritized together. So you decide whether you have to stop on the release to fix this real soon, or whether it can wait, and that sort of thing. Reducing the number of them has also the benefit of making that a more doable process, right? If I
Mm.
have 10,000 results, how am I going to ever
To
prioritize
mix
that
with
in?
the with the work.
Exactly,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you don't have 10,000 features, right? You have, and I mean,
Mm,
sure, you can group them and do that differently and such, but I think getting things to a reasonable number and being able to, it's the other way. I also kind of agree on ratcheting up as well. So when you're introducing a new tool, introducing a new, a new process with these tooling, to kind of start with just their very most criticals, and then criticals and highs, and kind of move the bar over time to keep that number low. But if the number is lower to start with because you know
yeah,
which ones are really an issue, or at least have a good idea, that can help move that quicker, right?
yeah. In this sense, I've seen several strategies, but probably I'm going to ask you because you have more experience than me integrating these tools into things. For example, the strategies reserve a percentage of the time for security issues, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
doing several sprints, for example, of functionality and one for hardening and security. So the other is having a team for development, a team for security,
Mm-hmm.
probably more. I think these are the three I've seen more or less, or more usual I've seen. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think that there is some benefit or some recommended approach? Is one better than other, or?
I I think it really depends. I think that, I mean, because every development organization is a little bit different, what their agile processes are, that sort of thing, plays into it a lot. But generally speaking, I do think that again, I think slotting it in the same as other work is the most important thing. So as other ongoing work, right? So if you are setting aside a chunk of development time for performance improvements, then you could also set aside a chunk for security. If you are putting items into your backlog and grooming them for your availability, then you could do the same thing for your security issues. I think that what I'm getting at is, I think, getting it into the existing process, whatever it is the most important thing. Because when it's outside or extra, that's when it can be discarded or let down. One often a problem is the ones that set a certain amount of
Yeah,
time, because that time can always disappear when you're looking at a production deadline, right? That's when you end up going and getting exception or risk or whatever it is for your organization, and moving on, because that time is very easy to shrink. It's harder when the team has to say, I had this goal for this sprint, or I had a goal for this iteration, this release, to get these security issues resolved, and I didn't do it. So that treats it the same way as other things if you didn't accomplish those things, right? And so
yeah.
if you're getting it into the same process, however that is probably the most important.
Yeah, it's true, it's true. The second scenario, for example, is I just thought on it now. Is let's imagine that we have a team that is not applying any of these tools, neither SaaS, neither SCA, and wants to start applying this security approach. So,
Mm-hmm.
what's the best approach? Okay, because at the end is how they could start. Because at the end, you do the first assessment and you find 1,000 vulnerabilities, risks, misconfigurations, secrets, whatever. For them. So, what's the best or recommended approach? Is what we usually see is, okay, this is the baseline. We start here. We don't allow any new risk or any
Mm-hmm.
new vulnerability. And from
Mm-hmm.
this assessment, we have a plan to reduce in 6 months, in 1 year, what we agree. But we have to reduce these security problems or this security backlog. And we are not enabling or allowing any new vulnerability. Is this
Mm-hmm.
actually the best approach? Is better to, okay, no, let's continue and start integrating, as you mentioned before, with any of the other approach? What's your
No,
experience in
you're
this case?
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's spot on. I do think that like I said before, keeping things to a manageable level, starting off and kind of taking chunks. I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to evaluate what your overall risk is, right? Because if the evaluation is that your entire application is open, and you have these critical issues that anybody can walk through the door, then of course the answer is, hey, get a WAF in front of that thing right away and stop it or something.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I don't know. It depends on what the issues are. However, assuming that these are, you know, otherwise mitigated, that they are otherwise, that they're complex enough that they're, you know, I think that taking an initial approach where, once you're introducing that new tool, once you're introducing that new process, of reducing the number of them, getting them to a small set, getting those into the process, kick off the process, and then start iterating on them. Ultimately, that's what you want to get to. But It depends a lot. The one other
Yeah,
thing the other thing I want to mention there is I do think that's the point to kind of start talking to your product owners and leadership
yeah,
as well, right?
with
You know,
the
and,
conscience.
and for two reasons. A lot of people have negative lists, or here's the worst applications, here's the worst offenders on this or that, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
also a believer in the best applications. Right? Maybe I'm just kind of a positive person,
Mm,
but
that's fine.
but the way I
I'm
look at
going
it
to take note on this.
is
Hmm.
almost gamifying it a little bit. Once you get
Yeah,
that list, here's our challenge, here's our things that we need to do, measuring towards success and treating it just like, development teams, because the other side, development teams celebrate whenever they have a big release, right?
yeah.
And they're recognized for it. They should
Hmm.
also be celebrated for getting this big new chunk of things and tackling it and reducing it, right? So,
Mm.
it's kind of a carrot and stick thing, but I do think that we need to look at those both ways, measure them. And to your point, what you started to ask about, legacy is very different than new things. It's very easy to start the block on new applications. I think that's a great thing to, I love blocks on MRs and PRs for
Yeah.
new changes, making sure those don't introduce new risks, right? That's kind of baseline. It,
Hmm.
Looking at the existing stuff, that's where that's why I'm saying you need to start advertising where you are
Yeah,
and
yeah,
where you
yeah,
want to
yeah.
get to. One other thing, if I could jump in, because something else that I've seen there that's kind of complicated or can be done, it's hard to do right, is that
Mm.
you have to be careful not to penalize the teams that have big existing source bases. A lot of times, if you have a bad list or a good list of things to remediate, if you're looking at the teams that, these small teams that have these little tiny source code, they're going to have less. You do have to factor in the size somehow and the age of the product somehow. You have to kind of get, level set it to where you're being fair to everybody.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I agree, I agree. Let me, because we are having some comments in the chat. Someone is saying that, or well, consider that the supply chain vulnerabilities cannot be controlled. He mentioned some sample, but okay, I think any vulnerability, as you mentioned before, you cannot reach the 100% security. You cannot find everything, but I think that actually there are mechanisms to mitigate quite good the vulnerabilities in the components, okay? Because the traditional software composition analysis are based on databases, okay? And probably until they don't have a CVE or a vulnerability identification is not able to apply. But there are, or the modern systems goes deeper and are able to analyze the component to search for
Mm,
malware, to search for suspicious behavior. So, okay, probably they are not going to detect everything, but are able to detect vulnerabilities and threats and potential attacks, even in the case of malware, in the components that the people publish in the registry. So we can protect the customer from the moment they are published. Then you have to put the research team to validate and to confirm and everything. But I think we have very good advance in this sense in the modern tool. So
right.
of course it's not 100%, but just to provide my view to Simon in this sense.
I
Mhm.
absolutely agree with what you said, and I love the question. By the way, the log4shell, the log4j vulnerability. That example was great because that's actually what brought me over to the information security side.
Yeah.
Was from that issue. Officially, I was doing a lot of stuff before then, but because I think it was an important example. I think it's something to look at. And to that question, it in some ways it is unavoidable. Uh, However, there's two things that we really, besides the stuff that you mentioned, I think there's two other things that we need to look at. We need to make sure that know your library, right? We got lucky with Log4j because it was a maintained library because a fix went out right away. You didn't have to stop using it in order because there's no fix or go to a fork or something. Like we got a little lucky there, right? And making sure the libraries you're using in the first place are supported is important there. The other thing is, another thing, if people are not doing it already, using a tool like Renovate or Dependabot or something to keep your libraries up to date, that makes such a huge difference. Because if you have to tackle fixing a security issue by also making API changes or coding changes to support new versions, that's a lot harder than just bumping a minor revision, right? So
Yeah,
there are some things, even though they're not avoidable, there's some things we can do to help make it a lot easier.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Thank you very much, Smith. You
That's a
have
fantastic
mentioned,
question. I love that
yeah,
question.
yeah, yeah. It's because it took my attention because it's something that probably is more. It's something that I don't agree 100%.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We are mentioning a lot of things. We are mentioning that, okay, a lot of work for the developers, SLA that needs a lot of things done. When when the developer has to face or to solve a risk or a vulnerability, I think there are like probably two phases. One is understand, or three, understand what is the problem, uh, understand why or what's the problem to try to identify the solution, and then to implement the solution. Okay, I think that I'm thinking in what's the most struggling point for the developer. Probably, I think that we have technology and we have a lot of documentation and information to explain the two first point. Okay, the problem is here because of this reason or because you are doing this. The solution is to do option A, option B, option C, for example, and then okay, he has to call the thing probably, okay, or to change the library or to change the calls or to whatever. And I think from my point of view is that remediation is the most critical point today because it's the place where still there is more capability or more improvement capability for the tools to support the developer because the other part, okay, you don't have the knowledge, but I can provide a lot of details for that. I don't know, Nathan, if you agree with this or
I have to say, I agree that is incredibly important, and having a tool that helps with that it can help a lot. I don't agree that it's the most important because there's one other step that maybe after that, because once the developers made the change, the real risk is the real thing you need to do is get it tested and out to production. It's why
Mhm,
I actually think of functional tests,
mhm,
intermediate tests, functional tests. I think of them as as a bit of a security control. And I know that sounds weird, but the reason why is because if I have an issue, say you come in, you have a high issue, right? Yeah, sure, the developer has to go find it. And to your point, hopefully they have good information about where it is. They have to remediate it, which having good information from the tool can certainly help that with that. And I think again, we're going to get more to AI fixes, even where likely
yeah,
it's going to. But how do you have once you've done that, how do you have confidence that you haven't broken the functionality so that you can get it out to production? That's something that I think is not always thought of. And I love to see teams that are on faster release cadences. I love to see teams that are pushing out things quicker because it also helps us for our security remediations as well.
yeah, I agree. And my question was in this direction. Okay, we have been or we are seeing a lot of improvements in auto fix for SaaS for a lot of different things. But at the end, okay, how do you ensure that you are not breaking the functionality or you are not, or you are actually remediating the issue because these models usually rewrite the code, but actually don't solve the problem because he focus on the line, not in the flow, for example, and this
Right.
kind of things.
Hmm. Yep.
So at the end, it's very important. Okay, I can apply certain uh, solutions or automatic solutions. But at the end, the thing is you have to test, you have to validate, and you have to ensure that everything has been removed without breaking the functionality of the application. And in the SAST, you need some dynamic testing. For the software composition analysis, it's very important to check the compatibility between my code, the current
Yep.
component, and
Hmm.
the target component. That
Right.
and this is something in the line of the reachability that we mentioned before. Is quite complex because okay, what has changed between the versions? Uh, we have first level of signature, but the second level of functionality is something that is really difficult to test and to validate. So I
And
think,
that's back to what I was saying about the renovate dependabot kind of applications to keep your source space up to date. Is that
mhm,
hopefully the answer is not much changed, right? Hopefully the answer is on the SCA side is very little. On the SaaS side, I think that having the smallest change possible is also important. So looking at these from a perspective of making sure that you're using good coding practices to make sure to localize changes as much as possible, that sort of thing. But to double click to say again, to really the most important thing I think is to be able to test and to be able to push your changes uh, with having confidence, because your product owners aren't going to necessarily care about, I mean, hopefully they care because hopefully they
yeah.
want the best for the product, but what they're being judged on often is the functionality getting out there and functionality not breaking, right? And so that's what you really have to prove.
Yeah, yeah. It's true. It's true. We are reaching more or less the end of the session. We have reviewed the best practices, the impact, how we can support the developers, and even that the importance of the automated testing in order to facilitate the contribution of the developers for these things. That just to start talking about the future, how do you see the evolution of the tools? We have mentioned before the ASPM that is the start aggregating everything. Mm, I think the ASPM goes beyond the SAST and the SCA. They provide visibility. That is something very important because okay, as a developer, or I can see most of the time the direct components I'm using, but Mm, I think the transitive dependencies are out of control because I'm not going to analyze all the tree of dependencies. It's quite difficult. Updates in any place in some moment. So I think that ASPM are providing good possibility to discover everything, to analyze everything, and to put all the context information in this part. And then the remediation is something that is also in work or work in progress in these tools. So
Hmm.
I don't know, how do you see the future of the tools and probably for the people? Do you think that is something that is going to be growing? The teams are going to grow integrating these tools in the software, or it depends on, for example, the regulation. If the regulation doesn't make it mandatory, teams are not going to implement,
Right.
or
I hope so. I'd like to say I hope so. I mean, to answer the broader question about where things are going, yeah, of course, AI is one of the answers because it is on a lot of things. But also, I do think some consolidation, like the ASPMs or some way. A lot of people have kind of vendor, overwhelmed by vendors and the number of vendors and what they're doing and everything else, and I do think consolidation of figuring out ways to consolidate, whether it's consolidating your tooling or whether it's introducing something like an ASPM that can consolidate your results and kind of get it all into one place and be able to treat everything the same way. Whatever it is, I think that is a good path to go towards maturity, right? And no matter which way it is, I think it's going to increasingly get there. Shift left, or as it to say,
Yeah.
start left stuff is really still maturing and changing really quick. I'm sure you could know better than I would, but it's probably, but it's changing very quickly. And I think that trying to keeping up on it, things are going to keep moving and keep moving in those directions.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But even it's not the shift left; it's going to be the shift everywhere because at the
Right.
end we have the in all the places that yeah we are seeing news regarding cloud security, posture management, purchasing, application security, posture management, and a lot of fusion and putting everything or integrating everything. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's very interesting. So thank you very much, Nathan. I don't know. You have to just to finish. If you could provide uh, two, three takeaways for the audience, what you remark? What two, three things will remark to for the day to day, for tips, for
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. I think I've probably been talking about it a lot, but think about as far as takeaways. Think about the developer. Put yourself in the developer's shoes. If you're not already a developer, put yourself in the developer's shoes. Think about what their concerns are. Work with your development teams and make it so that they can and help them to solve their problems instead of just your problems, right? um, and if you work together on that, you can get to, I think, better overall an overall state, overall process. To some of the stuff we were talking about, I do think that some of the tools are going to evolve to get more reachability, to get more auto fixes, to be able to get some of those things that will help development teams. And we need to get more of that, more of a partnership, more into that workflow in order to be really successful.
thank you very much. I will remark this part of the visibility. I think that is something very important because you cannot protect what you don't see. So it's not only about knowing that you have a vulnerability, it's knowing even before where you can have vulnerability. So first discover all the components, discover all the source code, discover all the places where you can have vulnerabilities, and then you can start doing this. And then you mentioned the topic of the automatic testing for the functionality. I think that is also something very important because it's the double check to ensure that everything has been properly resolved. So I will say these two things, and just the approach to start doing this. Okay, create a legacy, prepare a plan for the legacy, and then start or apply the security approach to be secure in your day to day. I think that is the just to everyone to everybody start applying this.
Hey, Zeus, I can't believe it's been an hour. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I have one question here.
Yeah.
Let me check. It's about um, it's about how to measure how effective is the application or these tools, or how a team can measure or the impact or the efficiency of applying this. I don't know how to measure that, how they are improving from the security point of view. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think you're kind of an area to probably be an expert on that as well. If I could say to measure, it's very hard to measure the effectiveness. You can't do it.
Mm.
You can't do it well.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that sounds like a throwaway answer a little bit, but to be honest with you, I mean, what I have done in the past is I have done comparisons when I'm doing like a tool comparison. I want to run it against the actual projects. I want to run them in parallel. I take and will on both SCA and SAST. Well, let's take the SCA side. I pull out the vulnerabilities, the list of them. I do a direct compare, like for like, and try to see where there's gaps or where we might be missing. On the SaaS side, it's harder. What you can do is take some of your common things,
Yeah.
SQL injection and CSRF or whatever those things that are important to your organization, and make sure that the new tooling is finding those things. Yeah, the problem is the better you get the better you get at this, the harder it'll be to find, right?
Yeah. It's true. It's true. It's true. Just to complement your views, some things that we have seen in some customers is the just 3, 4 KPIs probably. DORA standard suggests some KPIs, despite or beyond the number of issues. Okay, I think that there are other issues that are important. It's not only okay. I reduce the number of new issues or the new security risks that I put, but it's okay. The 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 exposure window that should be smaller each time. The time to detect security risk that should be also as short as possible, okay, in order to detect soon and solve soon. That is the ideal approach, okay. And then at the end, the severity, and the other is related with the topic you mentioned before regarding the test is how many times I have to redeploy or to resolve or resolve a potential issue. That is an indicator of something is not properly corrected or solved or whatever. So
Yeah, absolutely. I to highlight what you said. I think an absolute number is very rarely a good measure. The things that the KPIs you're talking about time to remediate, time to identify, time to remediate. Those things are much better indicators generally. So yeah,
mhm.
I absolutely agree. Now I think on looking at a new tool and trying to figure like for like with previous tools, that can be a little challenging, even from that standpoint. I guess with a new tool, if you're resolving them faster, that is a great that is a great way to measure that. Absolutely.
Great, great, thank you. I'm having more comments.
Yeah.
Hopefully, is
Oh, wonderful. Please.
is animating. Yeah. So, David, how do we recommend to aggregate SCA and SAST results in a backlog that could be correctly managed or with some efficiency?
I know you have an
Mm,
answer to that, but my very quick answer on that is as far as the backlog. Ultimately, you're talking Jira, you're talking or whatever system you use for your management of stories and getting. th- Ultimately, I think you need to get it to where the developers are in the same form that they are using for everything else, not just SCA and SAST results.
yeah.
Or there's also specific tools for that as well. And if organizations are at that level of maturity, then absolutely that's a great answer as well. However, I think probably there's also answers from the SPM side, right, Jesus?
Mm. I agree with you. It's not only about these two types. We have to consider everything together. And at the end, the idea is not to have a list of SaaS for developers, a list of SEA for the people in charge of managing the components, because probably if you solve or if you change something in the code, you automatically remove the problem in the third party, okay? Because you change the path or the propagation path or whatever, because of this is so important to see everything together and to analyze the impact of this change or the change on the code. If I would have to prioritize one one backlog, merging functionality and issues of security, just regarding the impact on my application. And then if I have something that is critical, that is reachable in application, that is in a critical for the business application and is has an EPSS or exploitability score very high, I'm going to do before any functionality, because if something happens there, so, but at the end is uh, one more functionality as the other, and has to analyze what's the relevance or the impact for the business. Okay, so for me, it's okay. It's important to enable the credit card payment, but it's more important not having someone stealing the data of your customers, for example. So it's just about the prioritization with the business impact. My view as product owner or as product manager, for example.
I also just realized that David could have had another meaning to his question. And if he's talking about from the technical standpoint of how you actually get from your SAST and SCA results into a backlog, that's a different question. I mean, of course, a lot of the tools support it, like we kind of were talking about with Jira or into into some of your other tools. But one other thing I want to mention there, if that's the direction of the question, is I would not be afraid to start using APIs, digging in. All these the vendors now have APIs. You can use them to, and I would use them very quickly, whether with code or low code. I would not be afraid to move towards being more of a DevSec or DevSecOps organization, using code yourself to automate some of these things as well. And I can get more details as well, of course, David, if you want to reach out, as well, if that's the kind of the direction.
Great. I'm seeing also, Luis, that mentioned that, for example, we have mentioned also about false positive, and we have false negative also. Okay, we mentioned before. False negative is difficult, or he's suggesting or commenting that okay, false positive, false negative is really hard to detect, because obviously, okay, it's difficult to find something that I'm not detecting. But the false positive is, if we want to increase or to improve the trust of the developers, detecting false positive is good, and should feed again the detection mechanisms in order to reduce in each iteration the false positive I'm going to to request. So I think it's important. Ways to use this information. Usually detection has a policy that is a set of rules or properties. So if something detects a false positive, we can do two things: refine the detection rule or implementation to refine and to take into consideration certain scenarios, or directly, if it's something that applies to the organization because it's something special for them, because the way they work or whatever, probably disable this rule or this detector in order to avoid that feature in the future. We have always the same problem, always the same false positive, always the thing. And even with the artificial intelligence, we can learn about, if you don't want to provide everything and to do manually, probably new systems start learning what the security manager do in order to learn pues the context of the organization to automatically fine tune the policy of the security. So I don't know if you have
Yeah.
other approach or
Well,
less.
and if I can dig in actually on the false negatives part of it, because like you said, it's difficult to find, right? The short answer on it is that you can compare them somewhat between tools. So if you are doing that comparison again, you can see if one tool is finding it and another isn't, and that's one way you can find them. Uh, but I really think that uh, in the long term, this is back to something I said before, but in the long term, what you're hopefully doing is not worrying about it too much, because what you're building is a culture that is looking for these things and changing how they're doing development themselves. And so the positives are important to be teaching that culture. The negatives, they're important. You want a good tool. I'm not trying to say
Yeah,
that it's not. However, no tools. What you consider a false negative is going to be very much, sometimes there could be academic vulnerabilities, for example, that a state actor might be able to get in, but depending on what your use case, just may not be important, right? So,
yeah,
so again, it's hard. It is, to your point. It's hard to find false negatives, but I would just try to make them less important.
yeah, yeah. It's true. It's true. I agree. Now, yes, 10 minutes more than expected. We close. We have people is starting putting things there, but don't hesitate to send the questions to Nathan, to us. We are open to discuss with anyone you or anything you consider. So feel free to contact us to refine, to take everything, to suggest or to share your thoughts or your feedback on the session. Would be great to hear that is useful for your day today. Okay. So, yes, to close, thank you very much, Nathan. Thank you for sharing your experience and practical perspective. I think that your insights today help to bring clarity and to understand how teams can make the security and, in particular, software composition analysis and SaaS work together. So, thank you very much. And I hope to have more sessions with you for other
Absolutely,
topics.
yeah. Oh, thank you, Jesus. I learned a lot from you today, and it's great getting to have this chat.
Fantastic. And thank you to all of you for joining us in the session today for this session, our SafeDev Talk. I I hope that taking into consideration this year, that is the year of integrating everything, taking into consideration the context, being developer friendly, to accelerate the adoption of the security tools and the security workflows in the day-to-day of developers is essential. So thank you very much. We hope to see you in our next SafeDev Talk in April. Okay. We will share with you a new interesting topic. And until then, stay secure. Thank you for being part of the SafeDev community. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.